have a little something to give you. I know that rivers and river rocks are special to you, and everybody has one on their seats. You'll make a blessing for their long life together, and you'll toss that into the river. If you want to talk about the history of Hidden River a little bit, then we got to go back to 2006. That was when a former student of mine planted the idea in my head that I should go into business for myself, because she was having such a problem finding a venue that was available, that she could afford. So she had actually called me, and I was driving on I-40 taking my mother back home to Winston-Salem. It was a flip phone. And I remember saying, well, I should just go into business. And she said, that's a great idea. And I got this warm feeling in my tummy, and I hung up the phone and I said, Mom, I know what I want to do with my life. And she looked really funny because I was already a college professor and had been so for many years. But when I got that warm feeling, I felt like I could do a business differently, perhaps, because for 21 years I had been officiating weddings for my former students, and I would meet with them when they were all excited about getting married and engaged, and I'd ask them how they wanted their ceremony to go, and then I'd show up on the day of their wedding and they'd hug me and they'd say, can we just get this over with? And after 21 years of hearing that, I thought that was sad. Why would anybody spend even a nickel on something that was as meaningful as getting married? Tempted to think that this beautiful day is a dream in the years to come. So we need to listen carefully in a moment to remind them that this day for them is not a dream. This is perhaps one of the most real days of their lives to date. I still thought it might just be a dream, but I mentioned it to a friend of mine who unknowingly had, to me at least, she had been a realtor in her former life back in Florida. She called me in January, several months later, out of the blue and said, you know, there's a farm for sale right next to where you teach, which is right across the river. And I didn't know that. So I got a realtor and I looked into it, and it was actually under contract. They were going to build 40 houses in here. And so I was a backup offer, and the only way I could buy it was by the fact that my father had passed away and had left me the exact amount I needed, plus all of my life savings, to make a 25% down payment on this farm. So I put this backup bid in, and then a couple months later, they called me and said, that deal fell through, you now have the offer. So that's when my heart kind of dropped and it all became real, and I knew that pretty quickly I had to make something happen, that you couldn't just put your toe in the water, you had to dive in. I did this really as a labor of love for the land itself and for the fact that couples are doing something pretty important. I'd say we've done over 1,000 weddings, and probably 10,000 people a year have come through this valley and felt the peace of this land. This land is where Native Americans have lived since 5,000 BC, the Mississippian period, I believe. Right across the river is the oldest Native American archaeological site in the southeast. So I imagine people have been living and loving in this valley for a long, long time. And I want this land to stay open with a very small footprint, and a wedding business seemed like a way to help preserve this beautiful farm, because if you're from around here, you know that there's not many farms left in Buncombe County. I didn't know how much it cost to really operate nearly 20-acre farm. It took me many years to actually get to the point where financially it was sustainable to keep doing this. I put every ounce into it and I didn't give up, and I began to say life and marriage in particular are like a river. You learn how to live with it, you let it take you where it's going to take you, and if you fight it, you will lose. The week of Helene, my sweetheart and I had plans to go on vacation. So Monday, when we were getting ready to leave, somebody said, sounds like the hurricane is coming into town. And so I looked at the news and listened to what was going on. Over the 17 years I've been in business, we've had several hurricanes come through the area, which usually around here means that certain areas of Buncombe County flood, like down at the Biltmore Village area and on Swannanoa River Road, they always flood. So I wasn't thinking too much about it other than the fact that this might be another time where the river comes out of its banks and deposits a lot of wood debris, mostly some metal objects and things that float down the river, and we have to spend about 3 or 4 days afterwards cleaning it up. And when it rises, it only comes down to one far place on the property, not near any of the houses, not near any of the pastures. So that's what I was thinking, that's what my employees were thinking. So what they did to prepare was to take the arbor and some of the chairs that were down by the river and bring them up to the tent in case it did flood down by the river. We went on vacation and we got back as far as Saluda, which is down near the Green River, which, as many of you know, was a place that was hit really hard. And it got hit about 4 hours before Buncombe County did. So Thursday night, I was looking at my Facebook page and one of my former students said, they're afraid the dam's gonna breach. And if that happens, it'll be worse than the 1916 flood. And I went, oh my God, you know, I had no idea that it was that bad. And then the power went out where I was. Trees went down all around the house where we were staying. And I and my sweetheart, we couldn't get out from Saluda until Sunday, so that's what, 3 days later. Didn't have cell service, didn't have internet, didn't know what was going on. The last I had heard was they're afraid the dam's gonna break. And my children live in the valley. People are here, animals are here. I was worried to death and I couldn't find out what was happening. I would walk all through the neighborhood trying to find a cell signal, drive around trying to see if I could hear public radio or any kind of announcement as to what was gonna come on. There were a couple places where for just a few seconds I could get public radio and I could tell that it was bad, but I couldn't tell what was going on. So finally on Saturday night about 8 o'clock, that's when a friend of mine called and said, it was bad. It's gonna be tough to come home and see what you're gonna see.
The National Weather Service has issued a flash flood warning until 5 a.m. Runoff from this excess of rainfall will cause flash flooding to occur. Flash flooding is observed to act quickly. Move up to higher ground to escape flood waters. Do not stay in the sea.
Finally, on Sunday, I-26 opened up. It had been closed, and that was the only way back into Asheville at that time. And so we drove up I-26, and we could see the French Broad River out of its banks. I just felt, I don't know if I can explain it.
North Carolina Carolina's numerous towns situated along the river had been completely destroyed. In fact, Hurricane Helene is of an historic magnitude. The wind field of the hurricane stretched 350 miles from its center. More than 100 fatalities have been reported, hundreds and hundreds of homes and businesses destroyed. Our hearts break for those who have lost loved ones, and we pray for the swift assistance and rescue of those who are currently missing.
It was sobering to see. We pulled into Hidden River and I just felt frozen. It did rise at the river like it always does, but it rose over 30 feet and it spread not just to the beginning of the pasture, but it spread all the way over the whole valley. I used to say if it ever flooded up near the barn, then that would be an apocalypse. So that's really what it felt like, that the end of the world had somehow happened, and it had happened right here. In the tent, the water was up 8 feet, and then back down near the far end of the property, there was a deck with a table and chairs, an umbrella and a fire bowl, and it just rose up like Huckleberry Finn and floated over the fence line and landed on my neighbor's property. To be able to do that, that's at least 5 feet right there. A neighbor's house had floated onto the property. All the beautiful gardens that I had planted over the years just gone. Trees that I loved just gone. Never seen anything like it. When I drove through downtown Swannanoa, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was pretty much destroyed the central business district and people's homes. A lot of people died in Buncombe County. I think a good number of them were here from Swannanoa. From what I understand, this all happened, this floodwater that went over the entire valley happened within a span of 30 to 45 minutes. Police were knocking on doors saying, "You got to get out." And one lady I know got out, and in 30 minutes, her house and 2 houses she owned next to her as rental homes, all just taken away. One of the sweet Swannanoa people who had a lifelong business here, Mr. Ledford, and he came out to help me restore some of the gardens, and I said, "Well, how did you fare with your business or with your house?" And he said, "Well, mudslide happened behind my house. The mudslide stopped right at the base of my house, but my neighbors that I've known since I was a child, they were killed. My other neighbor's house completely wiped away." So that's what it was like in the valley here for people. People, animals, an apartment building just was swept off the side of the river not far from here, and it landed on the bridge with people in it. The mountains have never seen 100-mile-an-hour winds, mudslides, and floods, all like this. This was a hurricane unlike any that we've ever had. Mountain hurricanes are not what you tend to think about, and it was pretty atrocious. And it wasn't just Swannanoa, it was all around little pockets of what I call multiple ground zeros. since then is just step by step trying to heal the land. And that means sometimes getting 10 of my friends out here and we walk side by side in a brigade through the horse pasture while the horses are in another pasture, and we look for tiny little pieces of wood or any kind of little shard that might hurt their frogs in the bottom of their hooves when they go back into the pasture. Or all the volunteers like Samaritan's Purse or the Red Truckmen, or just random people from Georgia with excavators who show up because their boss told them to come up here and help. So I would say the first couple of months was just a lot of people from somewhere else who were here just helping us. And that was such a kindness to see people giving that much. And it was also very humbling for me because I had always thought I was the giver. And all of a sudden I was having to receive from people. And that was difficult to accept, that that was a new identity of somebody who was going to ask for help and take it. In January, I probably was thinking about quitting. And then one day I was at Whole Foods and I saw the rabbi that I used to teach with. And I said, "Rabbi, hey, do you remember me? It's Jeannie." And he turned around and he put his arms out and he said, "Yes, you're responsible for the happiest day in my family's life." And then I remembered, dang, that's right, his daughter got married out here years ago. And I was thinking about him primarily from the teaching aspect, but he turned around and he said, "You're responsible for the happiest day in my family's life." So I went back home and I said, maybe I shouldn't quit. If what I've been doing is bringing that much happiness into people's lives, then I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm not going to let Helene be the end of my story as a business. And we plan to keep on doing weddings and memorial services and retreats and family reunions. Whatever way that people want to enjoy this beautiful valley, we're here.